October 10th, 1979. A 20-year-old kid steps onto the ice for his first game in the National Hockey League. If you were building the optimal hockey player in a laboratory to survive the late 1970s, you would definitively not build this guy. The NHL at this time is fundamentally governed by blunt force trauma. It is the lingering shadow of the Broad Street bullies. The underlying physics of the sport dictate that mass, intimidation, and momentum win championships. You hit hard, you defend the front of the net, and you grind your opponent into physical submission. Then, you have Wayne Gretzky. He is just under 6 feet tall, but he weighs roughly 170 pounds soaking wet. He routinely finishes dead last in his team's strength and conditioning tests. By every established metric of the era, he is a biological anomaly who should be broken in half by the violent realities of professional hockey. But he isn't. And to understand exactly why, we have to stop looking at his physical profile and start looking at his cognitive processing. Gretzky didn't play the same game everyone else did. While the rest of the league was playing a reactive, physical game, chasing the puck, Gretzky was mapping the geometry of the ice. He understood a fundamental variable that the rest of the league hadn't grasped yet. The most dangerous space on the rink wasn't in front of the net where massive defensemen were waiting to cross-check you. It was the dead zone directly behind the net. He turned that space into his personal command center. They called it the office. From there, he could manipulate the defense, dictate the flow of time, and wait for the exact millisecond a passing lane opened up. The real-world consequence of this spatial intelligence culminated on the night of December 30th, 1981. For decades, the holy grail of hockey mathematics was Maurice Richard's benchmark of 50 goals in 50 games. It was considered the absolute ceiling of human offensive capability. On this night, against the Philadelphia Flyers, Gretzky scored 5 goals. He hit the 50-goal mark, but he didn't do it in 50 games. He did it in 39. Let that sink in. He didn't just beat the record. He rendered it completely obsolete. He broke the math of the sport. At this exact moment, Wayne Gretzky shifted from being a highly touted prospect to an undeniable systemic phenomenon. But as we know in the real world, individual brilliance does not automatically equate to absolute championship dominance. Hitting 50 goals in 39 games proved that Gretzky could outsmart the regular season. But the NHL playoffs are an entirely different ecosystem. The variables change. Time and space compress, the officiating tightens up, and the physical toll becomes the primary driver of success. By the spring of 1983, the Edmonton Oilers are an absolute offensive juggernaut, but they are about to run into a brick wall. That wall is the New York Islanders. The Islanders are a battle-hardened dynasty. They are big, they are mean, and they understand the grueling, attritional cost of winning a Stanley Cup. On May 17, 1983, the Islanders complete a 4-game sweep of the Oilers in the Stanley Cup Finals. They shut Gretzky down. They hit him constantly. They take away his passing lanes, and they force him to play their grinding, exhausting style of hockey. In the immediate aftermath, the narrative surrounding Gretzky shifts. The criticism is loud, and from an outside perspective, completely logical. Wayne Gretzky is a regular season points machine who pads his stats, but his finesse game fundamentally cannot survive the heavy, violent reality of championship hockey. Here is where the psychology of a true great separates from the rest. Most players would double down on what got them there, blaming bad puck luck or unfair refereeing. Gretzky and the Oilers did the exact opposite. After Game 4, as the story goes, Gretzky and his teammates walked past the Islanders' locker room. They expected to hear a massive, chaotic celebration. Instead, they saw exhausted men covered in ice packs, bruised, bleeding, and barely able to stand up. That specific moment was the catalyst. It was a direct injection of reality. Gretzky realized, with stark clarity, that pure offensive geometry was insufficient. You cannot out-finesse a seasoned dynasty without paying the physical toll. The cause and effect was undeniable. To win, the Oilers had to adopt a grueling, two-way commitment. They had to learn how to suffer. Gretzky absorbed this lesson, and the systemic shift across the Edmonton roster was immediate. They didn't abandon their speed or their offensive brilliance. They simply layered it on top of a newfound defensive accountability and physical resilience. Exactly 1 year later, the collision course resets. May 19, 1984. The Oilers face the Islanders again in the Stanley Cup Finals, but this time, the baseline has changed. Edmonton doesn't just beat New York. They dismantle them in 5 games. They take the hits, they fight through the neutral zone, and they officially overthrow the NHL's most dominant physical dynasty. This victory is the critical paradigm shift in Wayne Gretzky's career. By hoisting his first Stanley Cup, he definitively silences the critics. He proves that his high-speed, high-processing style isn't just a regular season gimmick, it is a viable, championship-winning model. The heavy mental burden of winning the big one is officially gone. When you remove the psychological friction of doubt from a generational talent, the results are usually spectacular. But what Wayne Gretzky did next defied standard athletic logic. With the championship blueprint validated, the Oilers essentially became an unstoppable machine, and Gretzky entered the absolute zenith of his physical and mental prime. He wasn't just playing the game anymore. He was dictating the environment. Because he no longer had to prove he was a winner, he played with complete, uninhibited freedom. He had mapped the league's defensive strategies perfectly, and he knew exactly how to dismantle them before the opponent even realized they were out of position. This total mastery of the sport's geometry leads us directly to April 6, 1986. This is the date that closes the 1985 to 1986 NHL season. It is the moment we reach the climax of Wayne Gretzky's prime, and frankly, the climax of individual achievement in North American team sports. When the final buzzer sounds on the season, Gretzky's stat line reads 52 goals and 163 assists. 215 points. Let's isolate the variables here so we can truly understand the scale of what happened. Up until this point in hockey history, breaking 150 points in a season was considered a monumental achievement. Hitting 200 was the equivalent of a human running a 2-minute mile. It wasn't just highly improbable, it was thought to be structurally impossible within the confines of a 60-minute hockey game. The second highest scorer in the league that year was Mario Lemieux, another generational talent, who finished with 141 points. Gretzky beat the second-best player in the world by a staggering 74 points. But here is the most incredible piece of logic. The ultimate proof of his underlying dominance. If Wayne Gretzky had never scored a single goal that entire season, if you completely erased his 52 goals from the record books, his 163 assists alone would have still won him the league scoring title by a margin of 22 points. He literally did not need to shoot the puck to be the most dominant offensive force on the planet. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a fluke of scheduling or era adjustments. This was the result of a mind that processed the game frames ahead of everyone else, operating within a system that had perfectly optimized his strengths. He took the brutal physical reality of the 1980s NHL and systematically reprogrammed it into a game of angles, anticipation, and mathematical certainty. Every prime has an expiration date, and often it ends with a slow, agonizing decline. But the prime of Wayne Gretzky in an Edmonton Oilers uniform didn't slowly fade away. It ended with a sudden, jarring business transaction. On August 9, 1988, the unthinkable happened. The trade. Wayne Gretzky was sent to the Los Angeles Kings. He would go on to have incredibly productive years in California. He would continue to break records, and he would single-handedly grow the game of hockey in the American Sunbelt, transforming from a dominant athlete into a global cultural ambassador. But the pure, unadulterated prime, Gretzky, the kid who broke the math of the sport, was permanently frozen in the amber of Edmonton. When we ask how good prime Wayne Gretzky actually was, we don't need to rely on hyperbole, nostalgia, or romanticized memories. We just have to look at the undeniable, real-world variables. He entered a league built on violence, and he conquered it with supreme cognitive processing. He learned the brutal physical cost of winning, adjusted his strategy, and then produced an offensive peak so mathematically absurd that it is fundamentally unreachable today. He didn't just play professional hockey better than anyone else. For a window of about 7 years, Wayne Gretzky was the reality of the sport itself.